Everyone to the EOS Fireside Chat. Thanks for joining us in Discord. If you want to take part in either jumping on and audio chatting with us or text chatting with us via the live chat contained in this Discord event, you can also follow us on YouTube and Twitter. And thanks for tuning in. So today we've got a few topics to discuss. Got actually a nice list to go through. If you can see here visually in the live chat, we got some people sharing their favorite video games because we'll be talking about decentralized autonomous gaming guilds a little later in the show. Sure, so let's go quickly through the agenda for today. We've got some EOSIO coalition progress. Guillaume from the UX network is here with us today, so we'll be hearing about that from him. We'll be talking about Gamefi and DAGs. Like I said, we'll be sharing some Wombat stats, kind of related. Some news about the blockchain Futurist conference that's coming up in Toronto soon. We've got a few attendees that are confirmed from EOS. Some Pomelo updates, of course. Helios Wave 4 incubator. We've got the Mandel 3.1 release candidate 2 that was released today. We got some updates from the EOS Zine from Lars. Eden election coming up this weekend, of course, and some more news from Bithumb. But before we get into all of those exciting EOS news, I wanted to share a few Discord updates for you guys. So if you may have noticed that we added a new channel today called Starboard, and that's going to allow us to kind of have a community curation of our most favorite posts on Discord. So if you give it a star, and if you on those posts, any post that gets 5 stars or more, they're going to be added to the Starboard channel, and hopefully that's going to allow us, to have a nice curated list of the most popular posts in the community. We're also running the same pop token bot is going to be running today, but actually the backend has been changed a bit. For you guys, there's no change. We're still going to go to the pop bot chat channel. So this used to be called stream chat channel. But now it's only going to be reserved for pop token bot commands. So you can go in there and type your EOS account with a $sign in front of it and sign up for today's pop token distribution. For all our other chatting and discussions, etc., we're going to be using the voice chat that's now found inside the voice chat text box that's now found inside this event when we're in the voice chat. So you'll find it in the top right corner of the voice chat event when you're in here with us in the audio channel. So, all right. So thanks everyone for joining today, and we're gonna get it started, get right into it. I'm gonna invite Guillaume to talk to us about some of the work that he's been doing with the EOSIO coalition.
All right. Thanks for having me. Nice to be here. Thanks everyone for joining. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, you're coming in clear.
Perfect. So I guess a bit of background on the EOSIO coalition. So for those that didn't know, although I assume most of you do, but about, 3 months ago, 4 months ago, a number of EOSIO-based chains came together and decided to explore the idea of collaborating for building the additional features, taking over the development of the EOSIO code base, and ultimately, after a few weeks of deliberation, there was a coalition that was put together between EOS Mainnet, Telos, Wax, and UX Network, and essentially this coalition has been ever since discussing various priorities and doing some work towards implementing some of the most, important features that we think are of interest for the EOSIO community. So our team, and our team meaning Origin, which is my company, we submitted a bid for the Faster Finality, which is essentially which was the #1 priority that was decided by the chains of the coalition. And essentially, the idea of Faster Finality is to be able to achieve irreversibility of the blockchain much faster than what is currently possible. Under the current finality mechanism, it takes a few minutes for a block to be considered final, to be irreversible. And under our proposal, we're going to shrink that to a few seconds in most cases, which allows for quite a few very interesting new possibilities. One of these is, of course, an improvement to, like in safety for any sort of transaction that may be high stakes or that may involve, an off-chain counterpart. So, for example, like very obvious example of when it matters is whenever someone receives, say, a payment for something. If you are able to achieve this irreversibility faster, then you don't have to wait these few minutes to possibly get your transaction reverted. So that improves up to a certain point the user experience because everything happens much faster. But more importantly, this faster finality also allows for safer inter-blockchain communication. We'll talk about that as well, meaning that you can now communicate between blockchains and have a very high speed between these like messages being exchanged by blockchains, and we can reach consensus much faster about the state of the chain and making sure that these transactions are not going to be reversed. And this is quite important because we also have been working on an IBC protocol, an inter-blockchain communication protocol, and under the old finality rules, it still requires few minutes for finality to occur. So this is, of course, like less interesting from a user experience perspective. Now, if you can shrink that time to a few seconds, it definitely improves greatly the user experience. And another interesting possibility following faster finality is the ability to also increase the number of block producers on a chain without incurring additional penalties when it comes to finalizing the block. Because under the current model, the more block producers you would add, the longer you would have to wait until a block becomes final. But under this faster finality proposal, now that time remains relatively low, even if you're adding more block producers. So these are the kind of main benefits, I guess, that faster finality by itself provides. But part of our proposal is also to include aggregate signatures, which are very interesting in their own right. They are part of the faster finality proposal because they allow for faster verification of the cryptographic proofs that are required to decrease the finality time. But they also open the door to a number of other future features that can be developed, such as better confidential transactions, more privacy, and so on and so forth. So that's in a nutshell, that's our take on the faster finality feature, and we're hoping to get that done over the next few months. I don't know if there's anyone who has any questions or any comments, so happy to try to answer.
Yeah, first of all, thanks for coming on and taking the time to explain this and taking some time to answer some questions. Much appreciated. Yeah, so does anyone have any questions, or does anyone want to add some further commentary to this topic? I shared in the live chat, in our voice chat here, the tweet from Yves earlier today or yesterday. That talked also about this upcoming update. So if you guys want to go check that out, you can find the link in the stream chat.
How does the payment system? Sorry, how does the payment system work with if there's a more BPs? Currently, obviously 21, so the more have to be funded. I guess be spread out more thinly. Is that it's going to work?
Well, I guess this is like a governance question. So that the way we're approaching this is we want to provide the tools for the chains to be able to modify their governance if they choose, in order to possibly include more block producers. Now, of course, every EOSIO chain is different. Some may want to increase that number. Some may want to keep it as it is. Of course, that also has implications with regards to, possibly with regards to inflation, to block producer rewards. So that's a question that's a bit difficult to answer because ultimately it's still a decision that needs to be taken by all of the chains individually. But it does open the door for multiple block producers. It might be as simple as just keeping block rewards the way it is, except now you would have possibly more of the standby BPs also producing blocks. It could also imply a different remuneration for block producers. Really, it's a governance question that
Yeah,
I think
It's out of
that
scope.
makes sense.
It's out of
yeah.
scope for
was just
faster finality.
Yeah, I was thinking EOS only for some reason.
Yeah, so the idea is in the proposal and with the back and forth that ensued when discussing the proposal, making that feature, it's not really a feature, taking that into consideration so that should EOS go in this route, or any other EOSIO iteration go in this route, that it be optimized to be able to do so. So it opens up a lot of possibilities in terms of future proofing, or I guess upgrading, in a way, EOS's consensus mechanism. And like Guillaume said, the how to and what that would look like, and the financial, that's completely out of scope of what Guillaume and his team are going to be working on, which is really the technical faster finality component. But having that in the back as a consideration opens doors instead of potentially closing future doors.
Exactly.
I'd like to add, this is Arhag, by the way, I'd like to add a little bit on the technical side. Why is it that that's relevant to increasing block producers? So as was just mentioned, these are separate matters. This just opens the door. It doesn't force you to go through it to increasing block producers. But if one was interested in increasing the number of block producers, or more accurately block finalizers, there's an issue with the existing EOSIO consensus algorithm, which is the time to finality scales linearly with the number of producers. So right now in EOS, for example, there's 21. If you doubled it, the time to finality doubles from 3 minutes roughly to 6 minutes. And that's because of a choice in the consensus algorithm to limit how quickly block producers or finalizers can provide their confirmations of a block, which leads to finality. It's limited to provide only one confirmation per block. And that was done as a way to reduce overhead, because all those signatures are captured on chain forever, basically, in the block headers. And so aggregate signatures allows for taking all 21 signatures and combining them into a single signature. So it compresses arbitrarily however many signatures as you want into a single one, reducing that space and also reducing the validation time. And so this allows for lifting that limitation and allowing signatures to be aggregated, or confirmations signatures, which confirm blocks, to be aggregated as fast as possible, as fast as network conditions allow, which is what leads to faster finality. But it also means that you could then, with no additional overhead, I mean, there's some overhead, but with better scaling overhead, linearly scaling potentially rather than quadratically scaling network traffic, you can increase the number of BPs considerably. So that was, as part of this RFP, it was requirement to look into a little bit of the performance of how well that could scale.
Thanks, Arhag. Yep, that's a very good explanation. So the way these aggregate signatures work is actually quite cool because the way with this now what you can do is you can take a number of public keys and then add them up, and that results into a new public key and aggregate key. And then you can take signatures that have been provided by block producers or block finalizers and also add them up and then verify that the aggregate signature matches the aggregate key in one operation. So that's very interesting from a cryptographic standpoint, because it now allows you to, as Eric said, to reduce the size of the signature that are contained in the blocks, and also reduce the time that it takes to verify them. And it may not seem that much when you think about 21 block producers, although it's still like fairly heavy because we have like one block that comes every half second. But as you start thinking about maybe like 50, maybe up to 100 block producers, it starts to matter a lot. So be able to compress these signatures into one single signature, regardless of how many block producers you have, is quite valuable.
And this has a very direct, significant cost, tangible cost. Now talking about money, when you're doing, for example, IBC between Ethereum and EOS, for example, correct, Guillaume? So if the block header, or I guess the information contained within the block, is now smaller because it's compressed, then there's a significant cost savings when doing this. And I think you had mentioned, roughly 20 to 30x cost savings.
Yeah.
In, for example,
exactly,
gas fee, right? There's an actual reason for this. There's it will save you money, literally.
Quite literally, yes, indeed. Because as everyone knows, executing transactions on Ethereum is very costly. The gas fees tend to be very high. They came down quite a bit from the last few months or a few weeks. But I remember not so long ago, it would cost like $100 worth of Ether to make a simple transfer. So now when it comes to verifying, let's say like inter-blockchain proofs, this is quite a hefty price that you have to pay if you have to verify every single thing under the current EOSIO method. So now with Faster Finality, we can drastically reduce these costs and bring it to a much more manageable level.
So again, that opens up a lot of doors, especially as then the other piece of this puzzle that Guillaume has been working on is that IBC between EOSIO iterations, but also between EOS and external chains, right? So having this holistic approach in how we're deploying code and in which direction we're going and why we're doing so is really not taken in a void. It's really looking at all of the different functions and directions that we'd like to do, taking into account all of those variables, and then that's kind of what informed the reasoning behind how to approach this.
Yeah, exactly.
There's somebody in the chat, I guess Drew and Yazbee's Turkey, that mentioned, will the inflation rate increase as the number of BP increases? No, so the inflation parameter is a different parameter. And so no, just because you have more BPs doesn't mean the inflation increase. Notwithstanding, if the governance process determines that it wants to increase inflation, again, that's a completely separate variable. So not in scope of any of this. And then Drew mentioned, I believe the number of BPs wouldn't affect inflation. So it wouldn't necessarily know unless they decide to make that change. And then only decreasing block times would, I'm not too sure what that means. But if all else stayed the same, and again, there's a lot of ifs here, the way that the BPs get paid is in a way two different buckets. So they get 1% inflation, but in that 1% inflation, if you were to split it up, 75% goes to voter rewards. So the amount of votes that you get, the amount of stake that is staked to you, it's a direct link. And then 25% goes to that BP pool. And that BP pool amounts to, if you were to produce every single block within a 24-hour period, give or take 328 EOS. So there are different within that 1%, there are two different buckets. What Arhag mentioned earlier is obviously the votes. Let's assume nothing else changes. Well, then your 75% component wouldn't change. That 25% component of that 1% would now be distributed proportionally to the amount of blocks that you've participated in validating. Again, there's a lot of ifs there, but generally, if people wanted to know. But we're nowhere near doing that. It's just that possibility will now exist. And then we would have to go through, like anything else, if this were to become reality, then what are the advantages, the disadvantages? Why would we do this? How would this in effect come about? What are the technical pros, cons? What are the reasonings behind this? What does this open up? We're not there yet at all. This is really it's out of scope for Faster Finality.
Someone, JJ Shabadu3 is asking, can you explain the way Faster Finality can impact DeFi, fintech, payments, etc.? An example of something that doesn't work all that well without Faster Finality, but would work much better with it. The first example that comes to mind is cross-chain arbitrage. So imagine you have multiple dexes all residing on their own chain, and you have like liquidity arbitrage opportunities where one dex somewhere has some token that's selling for, let's say, $10, and there's another chain somewhere where someone is willing to buy that token for $10.10. Then with Faster Finality, you can essentially much quicker, you can buy it on the first chain, then transfer it to the second chain using IBC, and without having to wait many minutes to have your token available on the other chain, and then profit from this arbitrage opportunity. So it does help liquidity quite a bit. It makes, I would also argue, it makes a lot of transactions safer in a sense, because if you start doing cross chain arbitrage and things of the sort, there might be some chains that you prefer than others. Maybe you trust a specific chain more than another. So now you have a lot faster response time if you want to move your tokens to another chain, and so on and so forth. And of course, when it comes to settlement of a payment, having Faster Finality also decreases the time, the number of confirmations, if you want, that are required for the transfer to become final. So I mean, I'm sure everyone has been had a chance to experience whenever you send coins to an exchange, it takes a while before they credit your account because they have to ensure that transaction is marked as final and whatnot. With Faster Finality enabled, now suddenly that time to settlement also decreases greatly. So, and of course, as I mentioned earlier, for anything that has to do with inter-blockchain communication, if you wanted to have a system of alerts, for example, something happening on blockchain A would be notified on chain B, so that a smart contract could take action, whatever that might be. This is now a lot more practical if we have Faster Finality, because we can know right away that some action occurred on the source chain, and now you can take corresponding action on the destination chain. So like everything that implies that corresponds to any interchain transfer is dramatically improved. And as we were saying, also this allows for more block producers without having as much of an impact on network traffic and finality. So these are examples of the improvements that it yields.
And to expand on that, the last part that you just mentioned, Guillaume, Faster Finality in itself clearly has benefits. IBC in itself clearly has benefits. What the coalition determined, and I guess is still in the process of determining, is that the two combined opens up immense potential, immense possibilities, as you just mentioned. And that's really where think about it for the others listening as well. We are seeing, especially Wax, for example, is seeing limitations of being able to run one chain in how, for example, the amount of accounts that it can facilitate on one chain, the amount of actual Wax accounts or EOS accounts or whatever it was, the amount of accounts on one chain, having faster finality combined with IBC in between EOSIO iterations opens up the potential for horizontal scaling like we've never seen before. And this is just a small glimpse of it, but this idea that you'd be able to potentially spin up new chains, purpose chains that would link together, and being able to transfer between them. If we're talking about faster finality, let's say between 1 and 6 seconds on both sides, right? So let's say it's between EOSIO and EOSIO, and it's a simple transaction and it's a 1 second thing. That means within a very, very respectable, let's say 2 to 12 seconds, you could transfer between chains. You'd effectively be able to, and we're not there yet, but you'd be able to scale horizontally the network in a way, kind of unlocking infinite scalability. We're not there at all yet, but that's one of the possibilities that comes out of having both of them together. And that's one of the reasons why the coalition really in this market, if you go listen to the, I believe it's the last Thursday's call, was in a way faced with a decision of, do we go with faster finality or do we go with IBC? Or do we create somewhat parameters to be able to do both? And the idea was presented, and right now the high level idea was approved essentially, and now UX and the rest of the coalition members are working on the parameters so that we can essentially have our cake and eat it too, and not have to choose between one or the other, and really position EOSIO very much so, I don't know how to say that, but very much so future-proof in a way, or continue down the path of having EOSIO as a leader of scalability within the blockchain space. And really the two technologies that UX is putting on the table, offering to the coalition, really does this. And so that's, I think, the most exciting thing for me, is continuing down that path of collaboration between what essentially are competitors, recognizing that working together, we can unlock a lot of potential that we've never been able to before. And those two particular priorities are, like, there's nothing else like this in this space. Both of them combined is pretty amazing. These are things that we were essentially promised 4 years ago, type of thing. This is what attracted, I think, a lot of us from a tech point of view anyways, many years ago. And we're seeing that it's now at our fingertips to a certain extent.
Yeah, I guess that's exactly it. From my perspective, I've been in the crypto space for quite a while. And back in 2011, when I first got interested in Bitcoin, there was this website called Bitcoin Talk that was essentially like a forum, and a lot of very interesting discussions were taking place there. And there was a user of Bitcoin Talk. His name was Tier Nolan, his nickname. He came up with essentially what was I believe the first atomic swap model. So like the idea was to create a transaction that would trustlessly allow you to exchange two different cryptocurrencies. He was giving the example of Bitcoin and Litecoin in a way that would ensure that none of the two counterparties to that trade could essentially like steal the funds from the other, and they would have to complete simultaneously in one atomic transaction, hence the name. And I was quite fascinated by this idea, and it was just was not even a proof of concept. It was just an idea at the time. And then for fun, I started working on an actual proof of concept on code that would allow to do that, which I ended up doing in 2012, give or take. And once I kind of saw it happen, like I was able to make a transaction between Bitcoin and Litecoin, I realized that there was something very important about the ability to communicate and exchange value between chains. And now, fast forward many years, in 2018, when EOS was launched, we were a part of that launch process. I'm the CEO of a block producer called EOS Titan, for those who know about EOS mainnet block producers. And essentially, we were one of the key reasons why we were so interested in EOS in general was that promise of an inter-blockchain communication mechanism. And I remember being really fascinated when Dan Larimer showed up on one of the Zoom calls with the block producers and started explaining his idea for IBC. And I was like, great, this is just around the corner. He was saying like, yeah, we should have that like in a couple of months from now. And that was back in 2018. And I waited, and I waited, and I waited, and that never came. So at some point I was like, okay, like better look into that thing and start see if we can build it, because that's actually really, really cool and very important to the future of this whole industry. So like, of course, a lot of other people have been thinking about interchain communications. And there's always, like shortcuts that you can take to get there. One of which is to use oracles that are essentially, the group of call them witnesses, validators, or whatnot, that will monitor what's happening on one chain, and based on what's happening there, they will take an action on a smart contract on another chain. So you can imagine how that would work, where someone locks some token on chain A, and then the oracles witness that the tokens have been locked, and then they would essentially create a transaction on chain B where they would mint new tokens, like wrap tokens. And then these wrap tokens could be used on chain B and moved around, sold, exchanged, transferred, whatever. And then you would essentially redeem them for the original thing by the original token by burning them. So like, again, you would burn these tokens on chain B. The witnesses would report that that action on the chain A, and that would unlock the tokens and allow you to redeem the wrap tokens. But the problem with that, of course, is at what point does the honeypot, does the amount of tokens locked in that smart contract on chain A becomes very big, and then the oracles either collude, or they get attacked, or someone's trying to hack them to find their keys and potentially run away with the funds. And that problem, of course, was one of the main issue that we've seen with all these bridges being hacked on other chains. Thinking about like the Ronin and Wormhole, and all of these mechanisms that we're using a similar type of multi-sig structure. They are very, very big vectors of attack. So for us, it was very important from the get-go to design an IBC solution that would be completely trustless. And when I say completely trustless, is what I mean really is that it should use cryptography and not trust in some special people or some appointed people to permit transactions across chains. So
I want to push back on that, Guillaume, a little bit, if that's okay. So I do want to push back on that claim a little bit, because my view is that these are all fundamentally Oracle based. It's just so there is trust in this IBC. It's trust in the consensus algorithm of the source chain, right? So you send information from the source chain to the destination chain. How does the destination chain know that this message is authentic? It's relying effectively on an attestation from a supermajority of it's relying on the attestation of the consensus mechanism of the source chain, which in the case of things like, proof of stake, delegated proof of stake is, especially if they're BFT, is something like a 2/3 supermajority of the selected block producers, finalizers, whatever you want to call them. In the case of proof of work, it's the 51%, so simple majority hashing power, basically. So compromising that is sufficient to compromise the messages
Okay, so I'll push back on your pushback.
Okay.
If EOS or Ethereum is compromised, then it doesn't matter because you're transacting on those chains at the onset or at the outset anyways.
Okay, I'll push back on the pushback.
So like if you don't trust EOS or Ethereum in this example, why are you on either?
No, so the way I'm thinking about it is
implicit, implicit trust, or it's implicit trust within the consensus mechanism. If you didn't have that implicit trust, you wouldn't be on those chains. And so it is trustless in that sense.
Yeah, it's important to define what we mean by trustless. But the reason I think this is relevant is because in this, what we were talking about earlier of this wider ecosystem of chains communicating together to scale. If the chains are effectively the same governance model, right, and they're just using different chains, then the fact that you trust one shard means you could just trust the other shards as well because they're the same trust, right?
Not necessarily, because the validators might be different.
Well, I was assuming
implicitly trusting the validators or the consensus mechanism of one or the other that you're transacting through. I agree, but that's implicit. So it's by default that happens. So it's not adding an extra layer of trust, which typically comes in the form of an oracle. So if you're already there, you've already gone through, you've already passed that boat. You've already crossed that line, essentially. But you're right that you need to trust the original source chain and the outgoing chain, but you're already there.
So someone who's trusted EOS, but then there's some other low trust side chain that has some of the application logic on there. They could trust EOS producers, but those other chains producers may be not as trustworthy. Correct. So if your application logic is dependent on that other lower trust chain, that lowers the trust. I mean, that increases the risk you have is I guess.
But the user knows that, right? So if, for example,
hopefully they know that, yes.
Well, if as a user, I don't trust the consensus mechanism of Ethereum, why am I sending the value to Ethereum in this example, or to whatever chain, right? Yes. Like I'm making that decision. And so in that decision, I am the actual bottleneck, not necessarily the trust within the chain. And I think that that's what's very different with what is currently being implemented or will be implemented with everything else we've seen on the market. Is everything else that we've seen on the market doesn't solely rely on, in this example, the EOS validators and the Ethereum validators. It inserts a third-party validator in between, and that's why I agree with the wording that it is trustless, because those two are implicit at the onset. The third one is the one that's not being added in the mix, if that makes sense. But yes, you're right. In
practice, I agree with you completely, because the other Oracle-based solutions do not have as the oracles the same set of parties that Correct. Are in that source chain. That's Correct. The difference. But in theory, it could be. And I guess I'm just pointing out, ultimately, these are all attestations. There's a way you can go further, where if you could actually prove there's zero knowledge proofs, the entire logic of the other chain, then you're still vulnerable to like false history attacks, double spend kind of things, but you're never going to believe something that violates an invariant of the overall system. But that's like the next level, which is cutting edge stuff. But as far as
Guillaume?
No, that's like cryptographers need to find better ways to speed up proving general circuits.
I personally love that, by the way, this pushback versus pushback and all that stuff. I actually agree with the both of you. And I guess like it's absolutely correct. If you, if you are using a blockchain, especially a proof of stake blockchain, such as DPoS in the case of EOS, but such as EOS, there's some degree of trust in the validator set of that chain that's implicit. And then, of course, if you are moving value from EOS to another similar chain, let's say WAX for this example, it's also I guess in an implicit way, you are also trusting the validators of WAX to do good by the transactions that occur there, and not overrule your decision as a user, and not steal the funds that are in the account or whatnot. When we build RIBC system, that was our definition of trustlessness. Essentially, like it was assuming that you're already trusting the validators of chain A and that you're already trusting the validator of chain B. We wanted our solution to not require any additional trust in any additional party outside of these two sets of validator. So that's what we mean when we say it's trustless. Now, there's also the questions that can that derive from this, and it's quite interesting for those for the students of crypto history. I don't know if some of you remember back in, I think, 2017, when there was essentially like the Bitcoin like block size wars, where some people at the time it was that was a little bit before block cash, Bitcoin Cash. It was something called Bitcoin ABC, if I remember right, and even like a little bit before that, the question of the block size became a quite hot debate between various users of Bitcoins, whether Bitcoin should increase the size of the blocks from 1 megabyte maybe to 2 megabytes or 4 megabytes or 8 megabytes. And people were essentially saying, like, here are some pros, here are some cons. And there was quite a bit of a debate around the question. And ultimately, there's a number of things that happened during that time period. But one of the very interesting one was that there was a coalition of Bitcoin miners that tried to force the activation of some of these changes to the Bitcoin network, and ultimately that forced change was actually prevented by like the threat of a user-activated soft fork. So the idea was that the users, a lot of prominent users in the Bitcoin ecosystem, and that includes exchanges and includes individual users, whales, and whatnot, came together and said, like, if the miners go ahead and try to push this increase the block size, we will simply go our own merry way, fork the network, and keep it as it is. So that's quite interesting, because essentially what that means is that ultimately that the game theory behind this is the full node users ended up deciding, not the miners, not the validators, but the full node users. So everyone that was running a full node on Bitcoin, they were not necessarily miners, but they ended up deciding that they would not honor the changes that the miners were presenting. So in a sense, EOSIO in general, like vanilla EOSIO, has a different model than that, because ultimately the block producers have this God mode power where they can decide with a supermajority to, for example, change the keys to an account, or to overwrite the code of a smart contract, and so on and so forth. So it is in that sense. I mean, there's pros and cons to that approach. Pros, of course, include the restitution of funds from people that may be victims of the hack. If the smart contracts get hacked, there's the possibility that the block producers can recover the funds before too much damage is done. There are cons as well, because now, of course, the immutability question of smart contracts is in question. And one of the things that we've been doing in the UX network side of things is we introduced a similar mechanism than what you have on the Bitcoin network, where it's actually a bit more complex than that. But what it allows the user to do is to mark a smart contract as immutable, and then prevent even a supermajority of block producers from altering the permissions and the code to a smart contract. So that's quite an interesting feature that I think we came up with. It's as it stands right now, it works, but it's there's a lot more things to that we have in mind that we would like to eventually build. But to me, this is something that I feel should also be discussed as part of similar questions, because ultimately there's a need, in my opinion, for true immutability of smart contracts that would prevent even the validators, even the block producers of the network, from modifying every single contract, or being able to eventually override the code. So I mean, on Ethereum, for example, you can't override the code of a smart contract. I mean, there's potentially ways around some of the immutability considerations, but in a sense, this code is law versus what Ben Larimer was calling intent of code is law, I don't think is a fully settled question yet, and I would love to hear more from others in the space about what are their thoughts regarding this.
I guess
so what you just
I'll go for it, Arhag.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say for those, because I don't know if how deep people are following along. Kind of as a summary, or in a way, I guess like a TLDR for those following. One of the key takeaways from the discussion that's been occurring, let's say for the last 20 minutes or so, which is very, very different if you've been following along EOS for the last couple of years. Two key takeaways. One is that the team that was chosen to take on this task has been thinking and working on this for nearly 10 years in one way, shape, or form. Two is the amount of developer power that is now back leading and guiding EOS development is quite immense, and it is much greater than what we've seen, let's say, in the last 2 years, give or take, or so. And so, in terms of promise, in terms of direction, in terms of tangible, change, we are, we're on the cusp of a lot of that. And I was just going to ask Guillaume, but maybe Arhag, you can go first, to talk about the IBC roadmap, because we're not talking about something. Guillaume is not saying, hey, we're going to work on something and we're going to get it, in a year or so. They already have this functional. And so the idea is we would be able to, as a coalition, deploy this on our respective chains over the next 2 months, depending on the parameters that we need to come up with and such. But it is realistic that EOS IO chains, between EOS IO chains, could have IBC within, by the end of the summer type of thing, or very early fall. And so that to me is extremely exciting. We're not talking about theory. We're talking about actual tangible development and value add in a very, very short period from a team that's been working on this for a considerable amount of time.
Silence. Yeah, I was waiting for the sound effects.
Yeah, maybe Arhag, then you wanna chime into what you wanted to say.
Well, I think so the conversation was going to immutability, but I think you brought it back to IBC. I think it's worth wrapping that up, and then we could discuss immutability if we have time, if we want to. So I'll let Guillaume talk about the IBC roadmap, I guess, and I can add as needed.
Yeah, I mean, I guess from our standpoint, I was explaining just a little bit how we came up with the like why we decided to start working on IBC, and then of course when it comes to trustlessness, then that's why I did this little segue into the immutability aspect of things. But it's definitely a different topic that I'll be happy to come back on another Fireside Chat at some point to discuss more in detail, if that's of interest to the rest of the audience. But to summarize, to wrap up the bit on IBC, Yves is actually correct. The for us, IBC, as I was saying, when we originally heard Dan Larimer talking about it, we got really excited about the general concept. we waited for a few years for a viable solution to be released. And then, as we said, it was not happening. We decided to start looking into this ourselves. And I believe it was towards the end of 2019 that we started doing some research and trying to figure out a way to get there. And around the end of 2020, we had a proof of concept prototype that was essentially demonstrating what we had. We discussed at the time with Block One. Arhag was one of the Block One engineers at the time who had a look at what we were doing, and essentially we kept working on it, kept refining it, kept improving various aspects of it, and it was always a kind of a chicken and egg problem where how do you go about releasing this? How do you go about because as I've said before, a bridge to nowhere is not really useful. So like it kind of requires a number of chains to participate to create a viable experience, an interesting experience for users. And as we started discussing with the coalition, we saw that everyone was also interested in in IBC was a very high priority for every chain as well, and even more so possibly for Wax, considering that they, as Yves was mentioning earlier, considering they are very interested in side chains and possibly like application chains that would all connect to their to the Wax mainnet, but would allow potentially like games to operate their own chain, have their own users, and only settle like trades on the main chain. Like all of their internal application logic would then rely on that side chain, and it's only whenever you want to trade an NFT or trade tokens that you would move them to the main chain, perform an exchange, and then possibly bring them back to the application chain. So our IBC approach kind of deals with both of them, both of these use cases, whether it's communication between chains that are completely different with completely different set of validators, or it can also be applied to the sidechain model, which may have either the same validators than its parent chain, or possibly a subset of these validators. And generally, like you could even consider a scenario where these sidechains would not have their own token, but would also rely on the main chain's token. So, for example, you could imagine a scenario where, in the case of Wax, for instance, where you would stake your Wax tokens to CPU and net, but you would also decide on which sidechain you would stake these tokens, and this staking action would then be reported to the sidechain, and then would grant access to resources, but on a specific sidechain. So that's quite interesting. Also, when it comes to concentrating the value of the token, making sure that it remains within the ecosystem and not fragmented into multiple different tokens that just kind of dilute the value across chains. So I guess I don't know if anyone has any specific questions with regards to IBC. Happy to answer any questions or provide more insight, depending on what people are interested in.
There was a question earlier, Guillaume, in the chat from Dwayne asking, is it similar to the IBC proposal put forward by the Boyd team, which utilizes Cosmos SDK? I believe the answer is no, but I'll let you explain perhaps.
So I'm not exactly sure what their proposal was. I know that at some point, I think during Pomelo season 1, there was a one of the proposals for funding was to create an IBC solution, and I believe it was the Boyd team that was behind that one. What they were saying is they were going to match the Pomelo contribution up to $50,000 or something for an IBC solution. And at the
Correct, yeah.
time,
That is the one, yes.
yeah, right. And I believe during season 2, they updated their proposal to now they wanted to essentially have an implementation of the Cosmos IBC on EOSIO. And it's probably doable. It's probably something that can be done. I haven't looked into much detail about the Cosmos IBC, although I know it's one of the ones that I prefer because they are also using cryptography and they're also not relying on oracles and whatnot. And it's like the whole Cosmos ecosystem is actually quite good from a technical standpoint. It has other shortcomings when it comes to resource models and with the token utility and things like that. I much prefer EOS for these things, but I do recognize that they built some interesting IBC technology. But when it comes to, especially when it comes to EOSIO to EOSIO IBC, it's, in my opinion, it's a lot better to stick to the EOSIO model and to really build it in a way that is native to EOSIO in order to avoid additional overhead, in order to avoid additional requirements for, conversion to the Cosmos, the way of doing things, and so on and so forth. So to me, I would say like our approach, I think, is better in that regard. It's native to EOSIO and does not require implementing some kind of fluff around to just harmonize it with something else. But I believe that in essence, in what it does and how it works, there's quite a bit of similarities. I think Dwayne is writing something, so maybe here in a second to see if he has anything else on the topic. But I mean, from our standpoint, this is what we essentially, when we did our research initially before we got started on IBC, we reviewed just about everything that was available, and Cosmos did come up as one of my favorite approaches. But it had like I said, like it's built for the Cosmos and Tendermint ecosystem, and it has as in software in general, if you're trying to adapt to another technology stack, typically you're gonna incur some overhead when it comes to converting different things so that they work with the other ecosystem. So that's why I prefer like sticking to a native solution. I still, I mean, despite all of the issues that we've seen with token price, with Block One and whatnot, I still believe that EOSIO is a superior foundation for building like smart contracts and blockchains. So, I mean, I think that despite everything else, Block One did a really good job in building this as a software platform. So, I think we're better off sticking to the native solution.
Trimbot asks an interesting question, Guillaume. With the idea of chains like Wax having sidechains, is this basically the same thing as AVAX subnets? If not, what's the difference?
I am not very familiar with AVAX or with subnets, so I'm not 100% sure what the differences would be. But the idea in general, and I mean, this is probably a little bit more along the lines of what Dan Larimer proposed originally in terms of IBC. If I remember correctly, at the time when this was floated around as a coming soon type of feature, the Dan Larimer's proposal, the block producers would remain the same across multiple sidechains. So then you would have your 21 block producers. They will also be running potentially an infinity of sidechains, and they would basically we can think of it as multiple different silos that each of them do their own thing, and then whenever there's a need for communicating between these silos, there's a small pipeline where you can essentially move the tokens or exchange messages between these silos. So that's interesting, but that's also, I think, a bit limiting, because the issue that we see right now is that when it comes to running EOSIO, especially on a very, very high activity chain such as Wax, the material costs of running a block producer increase dramatically, and probably one of the most difficult to scale aspect is RAM. So it's not necessarily easy to run multiple side chains with the same set of block producers. Some block producers may be more specialized in governance or writing software. Some of them might be specialized more in running infrastructure and so on and so forth. So I think there's some respect, some consideration that needs to be given to the technical proficiency of various block producers when it comes to deciding how you want to scale this thing. So my opinion, and it's just an opinion, Wax can of course tackle that problem the way they want, and every chain has the prerogative as well, would be to possibly create a model where a subset of block producers would be able to run these side chains. So assuming, for example, that you have 21 block producers on the chain plus maybe like 50 standby block producers, my idea would be to for a sidechain model to be able to tap into that quote unused resource, which is the standby block producers, and possibly allow them to run side chains that would connect with the mainnet. So now you would have the ability to kind of organize the block producers of the network based on their technical proficiency, based on some degree of DPoS ranking. They need to still be voted in, vetted by the community, but then they could get a task of running a side chain, for example, and that would connect with them in net. So I think if we compare this to Dan Larimer's original proposal, I believe that this approach would yield more flexibility. Again, it's still up to the individual chains to decide how they manage the governance process. But to me, I feel like there's a lot of untapped resources in these standby block producers that are essentially being paid, sometimes for not doing very much. So that's my kind of take on the question of like who should be the validators on these side chains. And of course, I mean, you can probably add to that also like application chains, which don't necessarily even require more than one block producer. You could run an application chain, which would be just, like one dApp running their own chain, and still be able to communicate with other side chains or the mainnet as well. So it kind of come back to what Yves was saying earlier. We're focusing mostly on the technology aspect of the software. When it comes to governance, we want to keep the door open, but let the various communities and stakeholders take these decisions. These are complex decisions. They have a lot of implications. There's a lot of caveats to any decision you may take, pros and cons, as always, trade-offs. So it's best to have broader discussions and to have to bring as many stakeholders as possible to the table and discuss these questions together.
And just to add to what Guillaume said as well, one of the well, from my point of view, because my mission mandate is to the EOS token holders, and that's our role within the coalition as well, is to represent our shareholders, which are the EOS token holders. One of the good things about these proposals is that they're milestone based. So essentially, if Guillaume doesn't do the job, he doesn't get paid, to put it as bluntly as possible. And so it really still puts the power in the hands of those that are guiding this process. And it really incentivizes or aligns incentives to ensure that multiple things. One is that even throughout this process, the UX team, in this particular example of Faster Finality and IBC, they've been very much open to the architectural and design considerations of, for example, the 3 other coalition members. So we've been, we had a call yesterday. We had a few calls on this subject over the last couple of weeks. But here's what they have right now. Here's what it's going to look like in the future. And now, as essentially kind of the client, UX being a client as well, because it's part of the coalition too. But as the client, we're able to work with in this case, at high level, the vendor, to determine and to work with them. These are our requirements. Here's what we'd like. So Wax has particular requirements. EOS has particular requirements. Telos has particular requirements. And what you see in the resulting bid essentially has taken that into account. So it's very much, and it has been very much, a back and forth between, in this case, UX, the vendor, and the coalition members being the, I guess, the clients, in terms of what even is going to be delivered, strengthening really for everybody involved, strengthening ultimately what the token holders will have access to. And that is something that we have not seen in EOS ever, being able to, in a way, negotiate at the table on functions as core and as significant as what we've been discussing for the last hour.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. I mean, just an example, for example, with regards to Fast Finality, when we being the UX network team and Origin, my company, when we started looking into that, our sole focus was to improve the user experience of IBC and to make it easier also to connect with other chains. But then as we started discussing this with the other members of the coalition, we learned that Telos, their interest in Faster Finality had to do with the increase of block producers. They were very interested in increasing the number of block producers, but they were limited right now because, as Arhag was saying, adding, under the current model, adding more block producers increases the time to finality in a linear fashion, which is not very good. So for them, that was one of the main requirements, was actually to allow for more block producers. And as we discuss, as everyone brings their own considerations to the table, same thing with Wax, for example, when we started collaborating, part of the coalition, Wax were telling us what kind of problems they were running into right now with RAM limitations and limitation of number of accounts that we can have on chain, and their need for sidechains. That opens up also like more possibilities for us to adjust our proposal in our software to also take care of these other considerations. So I think all in all, it's been a very, very fruitful exercise so far. A lot of very good ideas have been floated around. I also need to highlight Arhag's contributions to these discussions, because he's brought a lot of very good points on how we can further optimize, how we can further increase the range of options, and minimize the negative aspects of taking certain trade-offs and so on and so forth. So it's been really a very, very good, very, very good thing to have all of these people coming from all sorts of different angles and sharing what their preoccupations are and what their needs are.
Yeah, as operators of the software, right? So the actual users of the software, where are the limitations? Where are the current pain points? And so the feedback is also not given in a void. The solution isn't being delivered without the consideration of the actual users of the product. Ultimately, that is something that we've never had as EOS, or actually any of the chains. We've never had that in the last 4 years, where as operators of the software, we could direct or help direct or play a key role in the direction of the software itself. And now that the software essentially is now in the hands of the community, we've seen a very rapid, but also very significant direction and collaboration that started occurring, where people now are not only empowered, they're incentivized to be able to upgrade the software, to be able to partake in the upgrading of the software or in the direction of how the software will be upgraded. And so if you go look at GitHub, the amount of work that's been done over the last couple of months, and now you amplify it with the coalition and other, essentially the largest users of the software outside of, from our point of view, EOS, right? Coming at the table, you now have other networks, other communities coming in and saying, hey, I've always wanted this. I've always had an issue with this, or I've wanted to have this at the core protocol level. Now there's a mechanism for us to do so. All open, transparent, collaborative, and for me, that's just been an incredible thing to be a part of. UX, Telos, Wax. I mean, the coalition 7 months ago was still kind of an idea, and once we kind of went through the motions and decided, or in a way made or put up the foot down of, all right, who's in, who's out. Since that's occurred, the strength of the 4 players that ultimately decided to join, I would say, and I don't know, Guillaume, what your take is on this, but the amount of collaboration and even though we're all competitors to a certain degree, the amount of collaboration and overlap and work towards a common vision is just incredible. It's been really amazing to be able to see that. And that's something that we did not see at all in the last 4 years. So the catch up and the speed at which we're able to catch up right now is unprecedented. And that is to the benefit of each token holder within their respective chains.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, it's like, even after this brutal market downturn, crypto is still a $1 trillion industry. And I mean, even if we are, quote unquote, competitors, everyone is kind of focusing on their own niches, and everyone has their own, I guess, like, markets and their own focus. We at UX are really going more the DeFi route. Like, this is what we are interested in. Guys at Wax are going more the gaming route. And I mean, EOS has been, and Telos have been very, very involved in the governance and kind of like setting up proper centralized governance rules and so on and so forth. So there's quite a bit of there's some overlap for sure, but there's also quite a bit of differences in the markets and purpose of these chains. And if you even bring non-coalition members, it goes even further than that. That, as we were discussing in the early days with other EOSIO chains, there were even some private chains that were running. Like you can think of like Bullish and Voice and Eva, for example, a ride-sharing platform. They were also very interested in what we were doing. So it's not that there's we don't have to be in competition. This is a big enough pie for everyone to find their spot and their niche. And the one thing that unites us is the same code base. It's the EOSIO code base. So for me, it's a no-brainer. It's like this is how it should be. We should be collaborating on what we share and still do our own thing, go our separate ways when it comes to market it and to bring it to our respective communities. But I think it's the best of both worlds. We can keep innovating in each in our separate areas while also sharing what is common to all of us. Anyone else has any questions with regards to IBC or Faster? I saw that someone was asking, again, JJ Shabadoo, about, it was Drew Block, was asking if this works with other chains such as Ethereum, Binance, so on and so forth. there's two parts in IBC, or two main parts, I would say, that there's on one side, there is gathering proofs of an action occurring on some source chain, and on the other side, verifying the validity of that proof on a destination chain. So for example, we also built an EVM verifier. So when it comes to when we create a proof, say, from the EOSIO side of things, we can also verify the validity of that proof on any EVM-based chain. And then when it comes to verifying on an EOSIO chain, a proof that's been generated on another chain, such as Ethereum or Binance, we're also working on building these modules so as to include as many chains as possible. So everything that has to do with EVM is a bit easier, like when because we've done it once. So like any EVM-based chain, the verifier should work with little to no modification. When it comes to verifying on EOSIO actions that occur on another chain, such as Binance, Ethereum, it's a different beast. You have to kind of do it like on a chain by chain basis because they all have their own consensus mechanism. Ethereum, of course, is currently using proof of work. At some point in the future, seems that they're going to be moving to a proof of stake model. Binance uses something that they call proof of authority. Solana uses something called proof of history. And each chain, AVAX is using Snowman consensus, and each chain has their own mechanism. So it still requires some implementation of a verification mechanism that is compatible with the consensus mechanism of the other chain. But we're working on this relentlessly, just adding as many as we can, and hopefully at some point have very good support for all the major ones today and in the future. I don't know if we have any other questions with regards to IBC or Faster Finality. Happy to answer.
When you're talking a little bit ago about collaboration, I just wanted to point out someone who represents multiple chains within the coalition, and that's Aaron on the call from Greymass. So it's cool seeing the conversations happening between the two of you after the most recent call describing the finality in IBC, and him asking like the questions, looking at it from a whole different standpoint, looking at it from the client side standpoint, and what these transactions would look like, because you need a transaction on a source chain and a transaction on a destination chain. And this is months before implementation, but because everyone's working so collaboratively, so openly, and communicating so well, it's allowing these UX UI issues to almost be they'll take time to solve, but by the time the products are released, ideally all of the bottlenecks and UX issues can be avoided completely, because you have someone who's so focused on the client side experience and so in tune with what's going on at the protocol level that by the time these products are released, we'll have a great user experience. So I just wanted to shout out Aaron as also being a core contributor to the coalition.
Yeah, absolutely. And Aaron has been also been working on a proposal for improving client-side SDKs, making it easier for dApp developers to build great user experience and low friction interfaces with wallets and so on and so forth. So I mean, when it comes to this collaboration, one of the really good benefit is now, as we're discussing, say, IBC, Aaron can also start thinking as he's working on these SDKs, okay, how can I make these SDKs work with this IBC and improve the user experience at that level? So we're also getting a little bit of an advanced view on what each of us is working on, and we can kind of harmonize our efforts to like make sure that we take into consideration what others are building and making it compatible at the onset. So I think it's also very valuable in that regard.
Yeah, Eve used the word holistic earlier, and that's very much the approach we should be taking and trying to get those opinions from different realms of this. I mean, these features are so powerful. And I really don't want to compare these two things, but because this is what I'm trying to prevent, I don't want to see another situation like Power Up where we get a great feature potentially that just it's delivered 80% of the way. Block One kind of didn't have that holistic approach because they never got into the wallet space seriously. And we need to make sure we're doing that. The user experience is so critical, both from the technical perspective, like you guys were talking about, in order to reach faster finality, and from like the actual buttons they click and the words they read. So it's a big, complicated process that we need to see through end to end.
Indeed.
And it's awesome to be able to see this sort of stuff in action and honestly to have a voice in it.
So we had also a digital maniac that was asking, is IBC and Trust EVM connected in this case? It doesn't have to be, because essentially, like Trust EVM is is kind of a, let's call it like an add-on to EOS to be able to execute solidity based, or rather like EVM based smart contracts. But since it's already resting upon the EOSIO architecture natively, we don't have to use it for that particular case of IBC. It would be possible, but it would probably be just like carry some overhead that would be unnecessary. So it doesn't have to be used for this specific scenario.
One thing that I'd like to know, I guess, Aaron, while you're there, and what you mentioned earlier, you kind of touched upon, the iteration of, or the deployment of a particular feature if it's not, and I'm paraphrasing, so correct me if I don't want to put words in your mouth, if it's not really looked at from multiple different viewpoints, and in particular the user experience, that can actually lead to a negative user experience overall, because then not only do you have a feature and the pressures or the expectations of that feature, people aren't able to access it, and it puts undue pressures on those that are at the forefront of making that feature accessible, even though it's not their fault at all. In this particular case, I'm talking about IBC. Can you touch upon any, because I know you've done some back and forth about this, but can you touch upon certain things, for example, more concretely on what you'd like to see and how you'd like to see implemented, and what you would like to fulfill as a role to ensure that that user experience from the get-go is something that's taken into consideration, and not replicate what historically on EOS has been the norm. And more so to that, do you think that it's possible to, within the current learning, for example, if we take IBC or Faster Finality or any of the other initiatives that we're working on, do you think that it's possible to use those as test cases to document, so that going forward, whenever we have more of those come about, that we actually have a mechanism and a process, a framework around what else is required, and what should we be looking at to ensure a particular successful deployment of said features? That was quite long, but do you understand what I mean?
Yeah, and to touch on that last point, coming up with a process absolutely would be valuable, so that way more people could perform this type of work. This could be kind of a case study, and I mean, all of these thoughts are like maybe 24 hours old now, because we had that meeting yesterday, and a lot of it came from that. But to kind of go back to the initial point of some examples of this stuff, our team really serves two audiences. One, which I mean, I think everybody is most familiar with, is providing like wallet interfaces for people to sign transactions with. From that perspective, when I looked at the IBC solution, I saw things like you're going to have to log in twice, one for each blockchain. And then you're going to have to perform 2 transactions, one for each blockchain. On a mobile experience, that is you jumping between your browser and like the Anchor mobile app, for example, like 8 times. There would be 8 application switches total to do all of those operations. And that's a heavy load. It would be 4 back and forths if you were already logged in. I mean, the 2 back and forths for 1 transaction is already a lot, which we'd like to reduce. And there's proposals for that, like the request for permission proposal. But this kind of just multiplies it in the direction that we're trying to go the opposite way of. So that immediately got me thinking of ways that we could come up with new proposals, or at least reduce, like use clever ways to reduce the amount of back and forth and make it easier for users to perform these actions. I think new proposals long term, we could have things like some sort of multi-login, where when you log into an application, it just communicates all of the chains that you'd necessarily want to interact with this application. So now we've reduced multiple logins down to 1. There's also the possibility that we could do this with transactions with the EOSIO signing request protocol. We could take and bundle multiple transactions for different chains into the same payload. So that way, when you make that request, it's possible that you're signing 2 things for 2 different blockchains on 2 different accounts in one back and forth operation. So at least with these types of systems, we could maintain the status quo instead of kind of walking backwards and making you do more to interact with these new types of transactions. So again, this is all kind of fresh, but those are the types of user experience things I think are needed, because otherwise, like performing these transactions just might be annoying to some users. We already know that even just signing is annoying to some users. So yeah, that I think is a long-winded way to say on the user experience side. And were you going to jump in?
No, keep going. I thought you were done.
Okay. And then the other audience we're servicing, we have been for a while now, and we're getting to an even more with the SDK proposal, is developers. We want to make it easier to build applications and share what we've learned as a wallet developer, as an app developer, and as an SDK developer. So that way it's easier to build this stuff. Looking at from the lens of a developer at kind of the demos I've seen of IBC, building that it'd be hard, honestly. Harder than it needs to be. You would need multiple instances of API clients configured to talk to multiple networks. You'd need to perform the logins and maintain multiple sessions. You'd need to handcraft 2 different transactions for 2 different networks and make sure that they're built properly. The wallet SDKs and the way that we have kind of planned them out are modular, and you can plug things into them. One of the ideas we have is for transaction middleware, which is so that way an application can say, I want to perform this, and then a series of actions is taken upon those transactions to either mutate them or to append to them or do something, so that way it you don't have to figure that out in your application exactly. The most common use case, and I think the reason that we went this route, was to do co-signing and provide resources for users for free or for a fee. Things like Fuel. Fuel uses this technology. And we do this kind of mutation already in our SDKs, but the way it'll be built is so that other developers can build plugins that do the same type of stuff and just embed it in their application. So this other audience where we are serving and are going to hopefully be serving more, there's a lot of potential design implications towards how we build the SDKs, or more things we could build for the SDKs that would make other developers' lives easier when they want to use IBC. We could potentially, do these bundled transactions. We could make it so they don't have to manually write out the proof action or something like that. It could automatically be created or moved into. these are all things that developers will be able to do immediately upon release of IBC, but they're going to have to know how it works, and they're going to have to do it by hand, and everybody's going to be doing that same thing over and over again because there's no tool that just does it for them. So I do think there's a real opportunity there to create tooling that could make IBC that much easier for developers to adopt, and then on the flip side, for users to use.
Wholeheartedly agree. I think it also brings up something that we've talked about on a few fireside chats, is this idea that what you just described, the thought process, the skill set, the bringing attention to, or the thinking of that user experience is something that we really don't see much skill set on EOS. I mean, it's not to take away from those working on that, but there are very few teams that are putting this at the forefront. We obviously know of Greymass that is doing this. And I take this opportunity kind of as a call out. If anything of what Aaron just mentioned resonates with you, if that is something that you are passionate about, and that's something that you would like to help tackle, there definitely is a need. I mean, we talked about this on the last Fireside chat again, and on the coalition call, if not last week, the week before, but we talk about this often. There is a laundry list of things to do in this regard. Like, there is a ridiculous amount of work to be able to do, and there are not enough developers with that particular mindset, with that particular affinity, skill set, and passion right now. And so if any of what Aaron just mentioned resonates with you, I encourage you, please reach out to Aaron to potentially go and help him out, either on his team or as a standalone, and or please reach out to the ENF. We do have the grant framework. We also have Pomelo. I mean, that it goes back to this idea of we need more people working on that UX side of things for EOS, because it doesn't matter if we have all of these really great features if the way of accessing them is flawed or is not optimal. It will push away, or it will make it that the feature is not being leveraged, it's not being used, and that user experience, that first touch point that they have with it is perhaps negative. And so we have people like, for example, the Boyd guys, I'm not sure if John is here, usually he's here, that really made it so that Power Up, to a certain extent, has been abstracted from a lot of users. Simple things like that are actually quite complex to be able to achieve, and they require a lot of capital and a lot of brain power and sweat equity to be able to implement. We need more of that. And so please feel free to reach out to Aaron. Please feel free to reach out to me, to Zack, to the ENF. We've got funding available specific to ensure that the usability of the chain is definitely a focus. And that, again, is something that was never put at the forefront prior to, somewhat recently, because we've never had the capital and the coordination available to be able to even offer this.
Absolutely.
Aaron needs more people on his team. If you can talk about priorities, right now Aaron mentioned SDKs, and we just went through an exercise of prioritizing within the SDKs which ones would be tackled and in which order. And then that's not even talking about the other components that we've talked about before, the priorities like the application registry or the Ricardian contract improvements. And that there's so much work that could potentially be done right now, that could be started by different teams, and there's not enough people to take those on. And there's funding available. Funding is no longer the bottleneck. The bottleneck is now the people that can do this and that want to do this. Yes, Stephane, that list, right? So if you go down that list, wallet SDKs, application registry, what else did I just talk about? I guess improved token standards is somewhat one of them.
The request for permission at the very bottom.
For permission, yeah. So these are things that have been highlighted in the blue papers And so there's information there. It's not like the teams are starting from scratch. Obviously, it would need more thought process into it, but there's already something there for people to get a sense of what it is we are looking for and whether or not they are the right people to be able to tackle this.
There's probably an equally long list of like anchor specific things we'd like to do as well. So like those weren't actually in the papers because those were specific to a product, but there's a lot to do.
Well, this is where you've been mentioning multiple times, right? That you've been juggling between taking things on like the SDKs, but then also continuing the maintenance and the improvements of the current products, which are key, which will leverage the SDKs and are currently the gateways to accessing a lot of these different chains, for example.
Yep, we're building the roads as we drive.
Yeah, exactly. So if anybody else wants to be a road builder, yeah, please reach out.
All right. Well, that was great. Thanks for everyone who participated in this conversation. Thanks for Guillaume for joining us. I don't know if he's still here. Thanks a lot, Guillaume. That was great. Anytime you want to come back on the Fireside, share some of your insights, opinions, and yeah, we love to hear it for sure.
Sounds good. All right. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So an hour 40 minutes into the Fireside Chat, we've done 1 of 8 topics. You guys strapped in for the rest, or are we gonna?
Impressive. We still have 53 people, so actually it's not so bad.
Yeah, absolutely. We peaked at almost 60 again, or like above 55, I think, during this fascinating, very nerdy conversation. But that was great. I was able to follow most of it, I will say. So good job on the speakers for keeping it accessible to the whole community and audience. All right, cool. So let's move on to some quick hitters here. I'll give a little Pomelo update. We've got the next stage of the Pomelo NFT promotion going on this week. You can now create your rocket potions and claim your rockets. As always, you can go to harvest.pomelo.io to join in the NFT festivities as we lead up to the launch of Season 3. So again, reminder, that's going on July 19th. So that's when applications for grants will open for Pomelo Season 3. So that's in 2 weeks. And then 1 week after that, we'll have the donations that are going to open. Also, just like last year, we're also hosting some pitch sessions. There's going to be, they're going to be on Twitter Spaces, on YouTube, and on Tencent Meeting, or perhaps Twitter Spaces for the Asian community as well. Actually, still need to confirm a few things there. But we have the sign-up sheet available already. And so if you're a returning grant, then you can already sign up for these pitch sessions, kind of get priority on the scheduling, because we do ask for a link to your grant to sign up to these pitch sessions. So if you already have one from previous seasons, then you can share that one. If you're new to Pomelo for Season 3, then we'll ask you to wait until you actually submit your grant application in order to get on this pitch session list. So some additional incentive to get those grants written, prepared, and published as early as we can. Was a quick update for Pomelo Season 3. Has I know many of you here have posted grants in the previous seasons, so hopefully we see many of you guys returning for Season 3.
And of note, we definitely look at this. So as the ENF, obviously during the Fireside chats, those who participate in these pitch sessions clearly, in my point of view, get a lot of advantage in the funding rounds and subsequent engagement rounds. And so I invite people to participate in this. It's a huge opportunity that you guys get. Don't drop the ball.
Exactly. All right. Moving on to our next topic, I want to quickly talk about the Blockchain Futurist conference that's going to be going on in Toronto. This is basically the biggest blockchain conference of the year in Toronto and, that area in Canada. We've got a few confirmed superstars from EOS that are going to be there. Yves is going to be there. Zack is going to be there from the ENF, of course. And we've got Daniel Keys as well from EOS Nation and Pomelo team that's going to be out there repping EOS, talking about the new EOS, explaining to people what EOS has been up to. EOS doesn't have a booth. I don't think we have any speaking roles either, but it's still important to have a presence at these conferences like we've talked about in some past Firesides. So if you're going to be in Toronto and you're a member of the EOS community or you're curious about the EOS community, definitely reach out to Yves, Zack, and Daniel on all the socials there, and I'm sure they'll be happy to meet up, say hi at the conference.
Yeah, Ted and Patty will also be there. And so we're going to be quite a few people there together.
There we go, even more.
It overlaps also with ETH Toronto. So the hackathon begins a day before the conference, and the last day of the conference for the Blockchain Futurist conference, on the main stage is the presentations from all of the finalists from the Ethereum hackathon. So pretty excited to scope out some new talent there also.
Beautiful. Looking forward to hearing some updates. When is the date for this conference?
8th, 9th, 10th, 11th of August. I mean, there's two, right? There's the Futurist conference and then ETH Toronto. I believe it's 8th, 9th, and then 9th, 11th. So I believe there's overlap, but yeah, it's 8, 9, 10, 11, pretty much.
Right on. So in 1 month time in Toronto, reach out to us if you're going to be there. All right. Let's see. Is Chris Barnes still with us? He was here earlier. We might have missed him. I wanted him to talk a bit about the Helios Wave 4 incubator that was just announced earlier today or yesterday. They've got 10 other teams that are participating in this incubator. I just shared the tweet here in the voice chat if you guys want to check out the list. It includes Haifa DAO, which is pretty popular and probably known by most of you, and a bunch of other upcoming projects. So that's always nice to see. And I guess we'll keep going. Some other rapid fire news. We had the Mandel 3.1 release candidate 2 released today. So this fixes some issues with history solutions, which is required for block explorers, and new features for Trust EVM. I know it's been already a very tech-heavy call so far today, but if some of the tech superstars want to share a little more context, I invite you to do so.
So I mentioned when RC1 was released that we're going to likely have a couple more RCs. So unsurprisingly, we released RC2 today that addresses some of those issues. Their details are in the release notes. There's some fixes to SHIP, which you're referring to with the history solution. There's also some changes to the crypto primitives protocol feature. This is actually a protocol changing fix. So version RC1, the version 3.1.0 RC1 had different behavior that is now obsolete and should not be used as far as crypto primitives go. Also, we're currently not recommending activation of the crypto primitives feature yet in 3.1.0 RC2. We want to complete some remaining tests related to EVM to gain confidence before that recommendation to activate in test networks goes out. But this RC2 is out there to fix the history plugin as well as some of that EVM related fixes.
Great. Thanks for jumping in here, sharing some more information. All right, next up, gonna mention the Eden election that's coming up this weekend on Saturday. So those of you who are interested in participating in the Eden election, you're invited to sign up at least 24 hours ahead of time. So that means you need to be signed up by 9 a.m. Friday morning Eastern, because the election starts Saturday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern. I'll share the site where you guys can go and register. And also note that the number you will see on this site to register for the Union election may not be accurate. It may not be accurate. Earlier today it was showing a relatively low number. And then in the Eden channel just now, we had someone update the stats. Edgar from EOS Costa Rica, also a chief delegate right now, said that there were 52 members correctly registered as of 15 minutes ago. So definitely, if you're interested in participating in Eden, go sign up. The amount of rewards that are being distributed monthly has been increased from 5% of the treasury to 15% of the treasury. So there's a bit more funding available for people who get elected through fractal democracy. Anyone? ChuckMacdonald. How's it going?
I just wanted to clarify that that's a proposed bylaw change. So the increase in funding levels wouldn't be taking place until at least the second month if it was ratified.
There you go. Thanks for jumping in.
Just a quick update. We're actively working with the Fractally team right now to fix the UI bugs that have happened, and very hopefully soon we'll be able to get the election participation stats and the 3 EOS donation for new members sorted out. But in the in the interim, please work on getting the vote out, Eden members. It's really important that the more of us there, the more Eden members there in the election, the better the results will be.
Do you know if the active members and pending invitations numbers are accurate?
Those are accurate, yeah.
So we've got 423 active members right now with 9 pending invitations. So hopefully we see some more signups in the next few days leading up to the election on Saturday.
Is that interface working properly now that Stephane linked with the Genesis.Eden community? Because I know that for some time Edgar was recommending that people sign up via blocks. Do you know, Chuck?
I don't know. I think it is working, but just the feedback isn't accurate. It just says you're still not registered. So just do it with blocks to be sure. I think I don't really have an accurate answer on that for you. Sorry.
I did it on the user interface earlier, and it seemed to change my, assuming the proper election participation status is 2 as opposed to 1 in the tables, then it seems to be working on the UI as far as inputting, but it's still showing me that I am not participating. So I think there's still a bug on that end.
Dogman, can you share that blocks link directly in the chat for people who may want to sign up directly through there?
I think so. I saw it this morning. I'm not sure what chat it was in, but I'll try to find it, and I think they probably can send it in a minute or so.
Okay, cool. Perfect. All right. Another quick hitter here. We had an update from Lars with his EOS Zine this week on Twitter. I'm going to share this tweet here from him. And yeah, I'm going to just quickly read it out for you guys. Basically just giving some sneak peek at the pencil art that himself and that he and his partner are working on. He thanks, of course, Pomelo Grants and the EOS Network Foundation for being able to fund this. And yeah, so Volume 1 will feature comics, editorials, and fractal fiction, and will be available for free later this month. So that's pretty cool. Love to see some results from the projects, you know, that apply to Pomelo Grants, of course. And hopefully we see Lars come back to Season 3 and continue on with this EOS Zine project of his. Definitely going to give some emoji love to that message in our chat box here. Okay, and all right, we got just a few topics left. We may bust the 2-hour mark, but that's fine. Bithumb increased their staking rewards this week, which is a topic that we talked about last week on the Fireside. Denis, if you're still with us, did you want to share your thoughts on these increased staking rewards?
Yeah, I can share my thoughts. So yeah, it's very positive that they're adding sort of increasing their staking rewards. That is a great sort of user acquisition strategy. Get the sort of token holder, or at least the small to mid-sized token holders excited with their staking rewards. However, I'm sure that there's going to be some sort of minimum or maximum deposits. So their current APY is 5 to 7%. So 7% on the maximum, 5% on the low. But what we see is we do see people or exchanges offer high yield, but for a limited supply of assets. Just for an example, Binance has also a really high APY locked savings account, and it's at 9%, but only on 40 EOS per account. So only a $50 or $40-ish dollars. And that's also 120-day staking. So some of these programs are really, really positive to get those sort of low, those sort of early users on the platform, but it is for a limited amount of assets. So it's not 7% on maybe 10 million EOS. It might be a limited supply, and it's a great user acquisition strategy. So it's really positive that they are offering those rewards. I'd be curious to know what the lot size is and how many pools are available. So right now, I think you need an account on Bithumb to know the next part. So right now, the only thing that we can see is that the minimum deposit is 10 EOS, 5 to 7% APY range. But overall, it's pretty exciting to see these Korean exchanges add staking rewards, or at least locked savings account on their exchange account. So overall, it's pretty positive, and I'm looking forward to seeing more details on their staking plans. So if anybody has a Korean Bithumb account, I would be curious to know the extra details of the savings account. So if anybody has an account, maybe try to put that first initial deposit and see what are the details.
Great, thanks for sharing your thoughts, Denis. And yeah, looking forward. I'm sure some of our Korean members will jump in here with the answers soon enough, or at least in a few hours when they wake up. Okay, and then final topic of the day, Gamefi and DAGs. So Yves wrote a fantastic article that was published on Nasdaq.com, which is really great, talking about decentralized autonomous gaming guilds. I'm going to share the article here with you guys in the chat if you haven't read it yet. It's really nice to see, executive director and founder of the EOS Network Foundation right at the top of this article on such a prominent platform. There wasn't any specific EOS examples, but it does talk about the gaming space, GameFi space in general, and how it will likely evolve over time. And it was really well written and very interesting as well. Before the show started here, I was asking people to share what their favorite games are. I used to play a fair amount of games, a lot of Dota, StarCraft, Warcraft. Those were my favorites. And this article got me thinking of the ways that these gaming teams are going to evolve in the future. And I was I attended actually the Dota International in 2019 in Vancouver, which is a big Dota esports tournament, and it was very exciting to be there. Some of the most exciting sporting events I've ever attended, and I was imagining in the future where these events will be attended by people that are part of these massive decentralized worldwide guilds, and I can just imagine how more exciting and engaging these events are going to be. So definitely a little shout out to Yves for this great work and for getting published in NASDAQ.com.
And to add to that is the gaming industry is huge in Korea as well. So I think, like you were saying, League of Legends is probably bigger than football in Korea. So some of the top talent is all esports driven. So I think that economy can thrive in sort of Southeast Asia markets.
Well, worldwide, gaming is one of the only industries during the pandemic that grew instead of shrunk in terms of user base, in terms of money being poured into. Gaming itself, the gaming industry is far greater. I think it's 4 or 5 times larger and projected to be even greater than that already than, for example, television or movies. Gaming industry is massive, 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 massive. And the role that I believe the blockchain space will play, and where then eventually EOS and DAGs will be able to play within there, even just taking a small piece of that pie could be incredibly big. And so we're definitely positioning EOS in the direction that we're taking at DNF for the EOS network, positioning EOS to be a home for GameFi and for DAGs. And so this article like this, what you're seeing is there's no mention of EOS that is on purpose. And drugs, and as James says, and drugs, which lead to more gaming. Yes. So we are definitely positioning these articles so that they don't necessarily talk about EOS, but when people start looking into this and they start looking, oh, well, who's Yves? Who's the ENF? Then they start coming into EOS. So it's definitely the direction in which we're going with this type of article.
Okay, Dags. Do you like Dags? Dags. What? Yeah, Dags. Dags. Do you like Dags?
Shout out to Brandon for this clip, and then Daniel posting the GIF right even before without knowing. Love it. Drew Block says DAGs are kind of like mining pools for play to earn, as he interprets it. I agree. It is kind of like mining pools, absolutely. And pretty excited to see how it all develops. Obviously on EOS, we have 2 huge games that are taking advantage of the functionalities available for games built on EOS. We've got Upland and we've got Wombat, which is not one specific game, but obviously a whole ecosystem of a variety of games. And Wombat earlier this week tweeted some pretty impressive stats about adoption on their platform. So they've had 2.4 million signups, 250,000 active monthly users, 20 gaming partnerships with AA and AAA publishing game studios, 40 different AA, AAA games on their platform, 65,000 daily active users 1.2 million NFTs minted for Wombat partners, and they currently have 700,000 NFTs staked in their Dungeon Master game. So Wombat is really leading the way on EOS in terms of building a very wide and inclusive gaming ecosystem. And of course, Upland also has some very impressive statistics of their own, which I don't have handy right now. But yes, those are definitely two examples of GameFi type of applications that are thriving on EOS. And I hope we see more of this stuff in the future.
Yeah, it's some really impressive stats on especially on the daily active users. I mean, if anybody is running backends, handling 65,000 users per day is quite the challenge. So I know a lot of their effort is to provide robust infrastructure for their wallet specifically. I know that team for Greymass also knows how hard it is to handle large loads on the wallet side. So it's definitely an impressive feat to be able to handle that much users. And also cover the resources and the multi-chain support. So great job, Wombat.
And I'm not sure exactly how old this is, but at one point, Wombat was creating 3,000 new EOS accounts every day. So I'm not sure if that's gone up or down, but that was like a year or two ago, if I remember correctly. So definitely, yeah, impressive stats all around. And we're a big fan of Wombat in general. They've been obviously with the EOS community from the start. And so it's been great to see them thriving and growing over the past years and months. All right. We did it. Rapid fired through 7 topics in 20 minutes or so. So at this point, if anyone wants to take the mic, share a comment, a question, feel free to do so. Open mic for anyone. Looks like that's it. And is that Denis' mechanical keyboard we hear? No, it's not.
No, it's mine.
It's not Yves' fault now.
Yeah, it's mine. Sorry.
All good. Okay, guys, I think we're gonna wrap it up here. So thanks a lot for joining yet another EOS Fireside Chat. It's been a good one, very technical. I'm sure we all learned a lot, and I'm excited to see all those Faster Finality being shipped on EOS. That's going to be a really exciting time. All right, everyone, thanks for joining, and go EOS!
Go EOS!
Go EOS!
Go EOS!
Go EOS!
Yeah, Dax. Do you like Dax? Thanks. What? Yeah, Dax. Dax. Do you like Dax?
Oh, dogs. Sure. I like dags. I like caravans more.
You're very welcome.